A call to order very gently the May 20th meeting of the Arlington Redevelopment Board recorded by ACMi. First up this evening we have a presentation by the Arlington High School Building Committee to fill us in on what's taking place there. So if you folks come up, introduce yourselves for the record and walk us through what's been provided. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take off my coat and club here.
I was afraid to. This is not a super formal meeting. See.
Should this assuming you sent this before?
I think this is what I sent. Yeah, this is posted
Okay.
to the agenda.
It's the same.
Yeah, this is the presentation some of you may have seen at
Sorry,
town
if you could
meeting.
just- if you could
Yeah,
just
I'll do that, sure.
Yeah.
My name is Sandy Pooler. I'm a member of the High School Building Committee. I'm the town's deputy town manager. Yeah.
I'm Kent Worst. I'm a teacher representative to the building committee. I'm a math teacher at the high school.
I'm John Cole, also a member of the committee and formerly chair of the Permanent Town Building Committee.
Go ahead. Jeff, you're up.
You're up.
Jeff Peelman, I'm the chairman of the committee.
So we're going to do an abbreviated, about 15-minute run-through of this, I think. Can I just ask, how many of you saw this presentation at town meeting? All right. So, some and some. Jeff, I think I will, as Jeff is the chair of the committee, I'll let him start off, and then each of us will pop up with some insights, I hope. And certainly if you have questions along the way, let us know.
So we're meeting with all the different boards and bodies and towns that we can meet with to make sure that people who are leaders in the community have accurate information to share with the public when you're asked questions about the project. Several of you saw the presentation at town meeting, and several of you have been following the project. But you know, essentially, I'm going to flip through this real briefly. The bottom line is that Arlington High School is a deteriorating facility, and it's overcrowded, and we have rising enrollment in the town of Arlington. We have 534, 540 kindergarten students right now in Arlington, and we have something like 1,400 students in the high school. When we began our conversation with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, we had fewer than 1,300 students in the school, and we were advocating for a design enrollment much higher than that. They didn't believe us. We presented all sorts of information, and now that's coming true. In addition, Arlington High School was placed on warning status by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges in 2013 because of the facilities. There's a lot of obstructed views in several classrooms. Our science labs are not up to par, and several parts of the facility are not at the standard they should be at for a modern high school. If you go to page 2 of this deck, many of you have been involved in Arlington activities for a long period of time, and you have a good sense of the history of Arlington High School. But the building was first constructed in 1914. Then an addition, which was an auditorium, was placed on the building in 1938, and then additions were put on the building in 1960 and 1961. In the mid-1970s, the town leadership proposed a new high school that was defeated by the voters. I don't know the margin, but it was defeated by the voters. After it was defeated by the voters, the town had to spend more money to put the 1980 and 1981 additions on the school. And it created a very complex, inefficient complex which we operate today. And trying to renovate this facility, trying to make this facility into a modern school is not possible given this physical structure. And so one of the main reasons for redoing this whole thing is because it just doesn't work as a modern high school. It's an inefficient layout of space. It's an inefficient operation. It's not efficient from an energy perspective. And it actually is a stressor, created a lot of stress for kids and students and adults who work in the building. Arlington High School has multiple uses. It's used as a high school. It's the lab collaborative. That's a collaboration of several different towns in the area where we provide special education services. It's used by the adult community education program. There are 4 different town offices in the building, and it's used as a high school, and also the Menominee Preschool is housed there. So it's a very active building with lots of human beings coming in and out of every day. It's not that it's there's 55 different doors in that building, and anyone who's ever run a school before or worked in a school knows that's kind of hard to manage, especially when young people are apt to just open a door and let anyone in it. We began this process in 2014 with our very first application to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We were accepted into the process in 2015. At the end of 2016, the High School Building Committee was formed, and we've been in a dialogue and in a conversation with the MSBA now for several years, 4 or 5 years. We have reached a point in this process. We were approved. Our project was approved by the MSBA. We're in line to receive $86 million in funding from the state of Massachusetts. It's not going to come this way again. So if the voters decide to vote no, it's highly unlikely a town like Arlington, with its wealth compared to other towns in the Commonwealth, is going to get this kind of money. So if the voters vote no on June 11th, the same thing will happen that happened in 1975. We'll end up doing something on our own dime, that'll be more costly and lead to a more complicated layout than I have currently. Our site is highly compact. It's 22 acres. The state standard is 25. The target is 25. There's a 24-foot grade change from Mass Ave to the fields that create all sorts of complications. Millbrook runs under the site, and some of the site is contaminated. So it's a complicated site, and that's some of the factors that inform the decision that inform our costs. We decided to move the information technology, the facilities department, to the Department of Public Works. The comptroller is going to Town Hall. The district administration and payroll are remaining inside the school, and the Menominee Preschool is remaining at AHS because it's more cost effective to place it there. And it's also more cost effective to keep the district the district administration inside the high school. We're getting reimbursed by the MSBA for the cost of the preschool. We're mandated by state law to have a preschool for children beginning at the ages of 3 if they have any special needs. We made a decision, been well documented, covered in the town of Arlington, to build a brand new school because we felt that was the best option for our children. It was the best option for the long-term viability, long-term sustainability of the school. It's also a faster construction cycle. The other options that we looked at meant 2 years without a gym, 2 years without auditorium, and time with modular classrooms, which are not reimbursed by the Commonwealth. We preserve, the design preserves 2/3 of the front lawn. It comes up closer to Mass Ave. It opens up more green space around the facility that's usable for academic purposes and educational purposes, and it creates more capacity for fields behind the building. Arlington High School is a highly ranked school, and the design of the school was made with the educational program in mind. I'm going to let Kent talk briefly about how we developed the educational plan. Then John's going to speak, then Sandy about finance.
So there was a lot of input. The principal's really knowledgeable about everything that goes on in the building. He was in charge of writing the plan, but there was also input from faculty as to needs and design input as to what we'd like to see to help make the plan move even more efficiently moving forward than it is now. So they took all of that input and came
up with this design. So, John, you want to talk about the layout?
Sure. I'm on page 6 of this here. The top left-hand corner, there's a little diagram, so we call it a party. It's kind of the kernel of the architectural idea that underpins the whole design. And it's very simple. The idea is that there is a central spine that connects Mass Ave, which would be on the top of the page, to the fields, which would be on the bottom of the page. So we've gone from 55 doors down to 2. We do have fire egress as required, but there's only 2 public entry and exits from the building. Along that spine, you have the 4 major components of the school. Humanities, STEM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, athletics, and performing arts. The logistical magic of this plan is that we build the first 2 pieces, the STEAM wing and the performing arts on the front lawn. We get as close as 80 feet to Massachusetts Avenue at the nearest point. As Jeff said, we're saving about 2/3 of the lawn and all the mature trees upon it. This allows us to gain the famous swing space. We can move students into these two wings within 2 years and then proceed to demolish and rebuild the existing school in the back. And in the September of 2024, current Arlington's third graders would move into a new facility. The drawings that follow show these blocks in more detail. I don't think I need to waste your time right now going through it. Some of the benefits are there's much more natural light in this space, and this spine space is conceived as the hub of the school where people mix and mingle, exchange ideas. And on page 9, there is a section through that spine with Massachusetts Avenue on your left and the fields on your right, and it shows how all the 4 wings connect to it, and we also make the transition of the 24 feet from Mass Ave to the fields, which is pretty cleverly done. On one side it's a stair, on the other side the stair splays out into tiered seating, and this is an informal gathering space for students in the course of the day. I would like to comment on the historical aspects. We realize there's concern in the community about going to all new construction in some quarters. We are mindful of that. We also believe that the history and the legacy of the site deserves to be commemorated. So we are, as noted here, we're reincorporating the facade of the Fusco building, which is the oldest one, built in 1914, has a beautiful stone centerpiece. That's going to be rebuilt as the entrance to the performing arts wing on the spine. We are also charging our architects to come up with a creative image of the column house facade, which is the brick and white pillared portico, and that will be fritted or etched onto a huge glass curtain wall, a big glass wall, maybe 30 feet high, 60 feet wide, which will face onto one of the internal courtyards. We've also picked out a number of artifacts within the buildings that we're going to keep. Some of the old columns, the proscenium of Old Hall, which is a beautiful piece of carved woodwork, the River of Hands mural, which goes from currently the administration central entry down to the performing arts wing, the clock tower mechanism. We also have set up a subcommittee to inventory all of the memorials both on the site and in the building so that they can be respectfully reintegrated into the new facility. So, I'm going to go over to Sandy on the finances.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about green things.
Oh, okay, do that too.
It's going to be a green building. Our goal is to be a net zero building. And looking at LEED certification. One of the ways we're going to make it green is to make it an all-electric building. That way, as the grid, as our sources of energy become more green over time, the building gets more green. We're also putting in geothermal. We're planning to. We're doing testing. We've already done some well tests. And ultimately, depending on the life cycle analysis of the building, we will determine how much we will do a mix of geothermal and other elements to make it as green as possible. There's other things written here which I'm going to skip over for sake of time.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
What level of LEED certification are you going for, and how come that level?
So I think we will easily attain silver. That's pretty much everything these days is going to be silver. I think we have been reviewing where we are. We still have a lot in flux now that we don't, our architects have reviewed with us what could or couldn't go in the building. I think we're certainly within shooting range of gold.
Say high likelihood we'll get gold.
I'd say high likelihood gold. I don't think we'll hit platinum. I mean, that's, but again, I think because we have it, our goal is to be ultimately a net zero building, a carbon neutral building. We've engaged the services provided by our utilities to do a sort of a unique analysis of the building where we set a energy consumption goal per square foot, which if Ryan were here, he could rattle off the numbers, but it is about a third of what our existing building is. So, and we're getting at least a couple of $100,000, if not more, of design and other services and incentives from Eversource
Yeah, so
and National Grid to do
200,000 I
that.
think is the lowest number.
Correct.
And we're hoping to get more.
The technical word is EUI, Energy Use Index, which currently is 60 plus, and we will be reducing that into the low 30s.
Thank you.
The other green I was going to talk about is money. This is expensive. Probably the most significant capital project the town has ever undertaken, because notwithstanding that it's had a high school before, it's never built a huge high school all at once. So we will be financing this over time, over about 30 years, with debt. The only way to pay for that debt is by going to the voters and asking for debt exclusion, which will happen on June 11th. It is unique in that, as I said, it's probably the biggest capital project the town has ever seen or ever will see for next, I would imagine, 50 years. It's not unique in that every other school building that's been renovated in town has been done with a debt exclusion. The total cost is $290.8 million. As Jeff said, we're expecting approximately $86 million back from the state. All that is subject to audit and review by the state, but I think that's a reasonable estimate. I won't go through all of the things on this sheet. Some of you have seen some of them before, but we have taken a number of important steps to reduce the cost from where it started out to where we are today, probably $30 million coming off. Well, actually closer to 40 if you take in the full cost of choosing this option as opposed to the more expensive one. In terms of impact to the taxpayers, as you probably heard, we think it's going to be about $802 per single-family household. There's also charts on here showing how that compares with other types of housing in town. And we've done a lot of study looking at how this compares with other schools that are being built in or around the same time frame in other communities on similar scale. And again, I won't go through all these metrics except to say that we think that on a per student cost, we are in the ranges of all the other schools that we see around us being built.
I would add one note to that. The per pupil cost is a little bit deceiving in that we are not counting the preschool students or the lab students. We're only counting Arlington High School students. So there are actually more students to divide up our total number, which would reduce our per pupil cost.
So wouldn't it make sense to say that right on this forum?
What we tried to do is to,
We are only using
I think
statistics
it's a
that,
footnote,
well,
isn't it? Cost per
Sorry,
pupil
John, go ahead.
calculation
Doesn't say what he
includes
just-
square feet for
He doesn't say what he just said.
we
we don't
decided
wanna-
to only use verifiable statistics given to us by the state. And to get into the how many students we have off the record or how much space we have that's non-school, we thought opened up too many cans of worms. So we're sticking strictly with the information you can get off of the MSBA website.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
finances too? So what will it increase the assessment per thousand or whatever the town does it?
so it's going to add to the tax rate a little over $1 to the tax rate. So again, depending on what if your house is valued at $752,000, your tax increase will be $802.
Right.
That will phase in over the next probably 4 or 5 years because we borrow money keeping pace with what our construction is. So it won't all hit at once. In fact, it won't really hit the first tranche of debt and the impact on tax bills won't hit until 2021, fiscal year 2021, and then that will scale up
Ramp up.
after
So it's
that.
about $1 per thousand assessed value. A little more, actually.
Just a little bit. I think it's about
This is more
dollar,
than $1.
$1.08 or $1.09. That's what it comes out to.
We were asked by people to do an analysis of what it would cost if there were a no vote, and the way that process would work is we would make an attempt to try to get back into the MSBA process. It's highly unlikely. Most districts don't once the voters say no. And so we would be doing it, a construction project on our own. In a best-case scenario, in which within 2 years we have to go back to the drawing board, get a new design firm, get a new owner's project manager, go through that process. We have to have dialogue with the community about the design of the building. We have to then go to the voters and get a debt exclusion passed. And a no vote, we would do a renovation addition of the existing building. That would leave an inferior school. We would have several windowless education spaces. Auditorium seating would be reduced. We'd have obstructed classrooms like we have today. We'd have several undersized spaces. We would not be able to have all the field space we want behind the building, and it would cost us more money. So it would cost the taxpayers about $212 more, and that's in a best-case scenario. That means we lose and everyone reunites quickly to build a project on our own dime at a higher cost. It's a hard sell. We don't want to dwell on that. We'd like to dwell on the positive. So we want to make sure that the Arlington Redevelopment Board has good knowledge of the project. We're having a forum tomorrow night at Town Hall at 7 o'clock, and we're going to give it'll be a much more extensive presentation. It'll be a chance for a longer dialogue. We're going to open it up to anybody with any questions for as long as people would like to talk. Do you have any questions? Any other questions?
Go ahead, David.
Well, I appreciate you coming to give us at least a high-level presentation on it. Particularly in light of the bylaw changes that were just passed at town meeting regarding the Dover Amendment, would you anticipate anything relating to the high school project actually coming before this board at some point in the process?
I don't believe so, no.
I don't think so.
No,
No.
there's not an intention to bring it to the board for review.
Okay, so this is really, at this point anyway, just purely informational.
It's purely informational. We tried to meet with every body and board that had any connection to town meeting, prior to town meeting, just so that we could educate people about the project. But at the same time, now we're meeting with leaders like you so that you can, when you're asked about this project, you can say good things.
And after the third and fourth wings are built and the fields are fully built out, how will the amount of green space around the building relate to the existing amount of green space?
There's more.
There's more usable green space for educational purposes. So there's a small amphitheater on the left side of the building. If you look at the left side of the building, that sort of just evolved as we were building, as the project was being designed. We sort of realized, well, we can put an amphitheater here. We can move the black box theater right next to it, and we can have plays and activities over the course of the summer and the warm months. There's green space. There's the courtyard. There's green space in front of the building, so there's courtyard on the right if you're looking at it, and then behind the building there's green space and fields, and those are artificial turf fields. So there's room there for a regulation baseball field that meets MIA standards, a softball field which we have now. We're going to flip them, and we're going to be putting soccer and lacrosse fields on top of that. So you can actually have 3 varsity sports going at once. In the fall or the spring, so you can have something going on the stadium, something going on in the 2 fields.
There's also a connection to the bikeway,
And
which
it's connection to the bikeway, yeah.
has not existed.
Page
and
10
this-
shows that pretty well.
Yeah.
And the entire facility is walkable. Like you can walk around the entire building. There's a big ramp on the other side of CVS, so it's easy. It's so much better in terms of pedestrian access, bike access. And like right now, to host a baseball game, we host them at Spy Pond because we don't have a competition-sized baseball field. And there was concern about loss of field space because of the Pierce practice field, but that's because of the DPW project, and we have no control over that. So that field's going to be lost. And if we renovate the current building and we can't gain that space in the back of the building that we're going to gain through this project, we're going to have a loss of field space instead of a gain of field space.
So can I follow up on the fields? So
Sure.
Yeah.
folks had told me that the baseball games would be played behind the high school in the system instead of Spy Pond
Yeah.
Field.
Correct, that's right.
So
Correct.
that would basically free up Spy Pond Field for other community
Yes.
activities, so it has that benefit also
Yes,
Yes.
at the same time.
yes.
And the fields, we're planning on having them be turf fields and have them be lighted, so that'll open up a lot of usage, not just for the high school, but for other organizations in town, like the Arlington Soccer Club.
The other thing is the fields will be turf and lighted, so we get both seasonal and daily increase in usability.
Nice, very nice.
Is there any direct engagement, an ongoing engagement with the residents on school or court?
Yes, there is. In fact, there's a dialogue going on right now. We're trying to set up they've approached us and we're trying to schedule a meeting with them as we speak. So our owner's project manager is trying to set up a time. So we were approached by 2 residents there recently.
Okay, I wasn't. I'm just asking
Well, it's
because
very timely,
certainly
because
there.
that email exchange happened. I was in the middle of it 25 minutes ago, so.
No, I was just cognizant of it because there are some residences right there who will certainly be affected during the
Yes.
not only during the construction phase, certainly, but their relationship to the school will be permanently changed because it's going to be a completely new structure, and what will be facing them will be very different.
They've attended our meetings,
Yeah.
and now that it's becoming more real, they want more specifics, and so we're going to meet with them.
Okay.
Any questions, Keith?
Well, I'm very supportive of the project. I'm really enthusiastic about the separation of activities where you have a performing arts center
Yeah.
and a sports center, which can also not just be high school, but get more civic minded. And now you're actually developing more of a civic center here, not just the high school. The program extends beyond that. And I applaud you guys for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The 2 other questions that people have been asking me, you answered one already. One was, when would school be ready? And you guys answered, if you're in 3rd grade, it'll be finished then. So that's clear enough.
If you're a freshman in high school today, you'll move into the first phase of the new construction as when you're a senior.
Okay. And then the other one was, who's overseeing the construction? You guys mentioned lightly there was a construction manager that's overseeing this and overseeing the costs and so forth. That who's
We have a subcommittee of the Arlington High School Building Committee that's meeting, that is put out a request for proposals, and we have 6 contractors, large contractors of Boston bidding on the project. Their group is meeting with them on June 1st. The subcommittee is going to make a selection. If the vote is favorable on June 11th, we would sign a contract with one of those firms in early, June 12th, 13th, 14th, somewhere around there. And that firm would manage the project with the support of Skanska, our owner's project manager.
And then we have that CM at risk.
Right. And so we're doing it through a CM at risk process. You want to kind of, that's.
Well, I mean, you know,
Yes.
CM at risk, it has
Yes.
a lot of advantages to us in terms of scheduling and pre-construction activities.
Yeah.
Given the size of this project, it's not a very big pool of players. We felt pretty happy to have 6. All of the biggest and the brightest names that you know from Greater Boston. So
Yeah. And
our plan is we would engage them directly after a positive vote.
Can you talk about the faculty reaction to this proposal? What's the faculty like about it?
The
What's
faculty is
it?
very excited about it.
In a positive way? Or?
Yes, I mean, are
you kidding?
Our building is such a maze right now, and it feels like it's literally crumbling around us at times. Students will tell you, yeah, the ceiling's falling in certain places, and there was a story my son told me when he was there a few years ago. Some kid, his chair went through the floor, the leg of the chair, and so there's no climate control. So I'm on one side of the hallway where the sun starts to hit the windows. I'm literally dripping sweat and cracking my when it's really hot out. Even in the winter, I have my windows cracked to keep my room comfortable. And across the hall downstairs, there's one of my colleagues who's every year their class buys matching T-shirts as a camaraderie building thing, and they bought Snugglies instead of T-shirts because it's freezing in that room all winter long. And so I would have colleagues, with coats on, and and I'm with my windows cracked to cool my room off in the winter. The navigability is terrible right now. A new student comes in, they're lost, and they have to get directions multiple times from people to get from one end to the other. And even when you know the building, there's bottlenecks. If you're by the blue gym, there's a stairway that blocks some of the hallway. There's those middle railings that block stuff. The building's a lot of double corners, and so it makes people file into little lines. And so if I have kids who have a class across the building on a different floor, they are going to be late from my class, and it's just a fact. And so, all year there's going to be a small group that shows up, 2-3 minutes late for your class, and it's disruptive. And students are always walking by your room if they're getting from one place to another. All these little buildings are connected with all these hallways. In the new design, you walk in either from the front of the building or the back of the building, and that's the central meeting area, and all the cafeteria's downstairs, the media center's upstairs. If you want to go to a classroom, you're going to go down a wing that's to a classroom, and it dead ends. There's no more, hey, I have to go by all the classrooms and turn by all these other places to get to where I'm going. And having constant conversation going by if kids are walking to get to one place to the other. So in terms of how efficient this building is, it's hands down better. You walk in Mass Ave, you're going to know before you even get in, hey, that big curved wall with no windows, that's going to be the auditorium. And you can see through a window, at least in the fly-through, hey, there's the gym over there, the black box theater. Oh, I bet going down the big stairs is going to be the cafeteria. Hey, look, there's the media center up there. It's going to be so clear. You're going to walk in and know how to get to pretty much everything as soon as you walk in the building. And you compare that to what we have now. And again, with all the other challenges of how decrepit the building is and how inefficient it is energy-wise, yeah, people are excited about having something new.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the
Appreciate it,
presentation.
Good job. Very good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good meeting.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to, once they move out, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny for property portfolio updates, just to take some votes on some of these. So Jenny, go ahead, beginning with 23 Maple. We'll vote on each one as we walk through the process here.
All right, so in your board packet online, there's a memo from me. There's 2 documents actually just uploaded for this. One of them is just a memo about 2 of the actions that need to be taken tonight. And then the next one is a request from Christine Bongiorno for a name change. And then I also want to give you an update on the renovation plans for the central school just in general. So the first one is the 23 Maple Street lease extension, which technically is coming up very soon because we need to decide whether or not to extend the lease term. We have a period of up to 5 years that we can grant this particular tenant, which would enable them to stay at the property through June 30th of 2025. Need to let them know whether or not we have an intention to extend the lease by June 30th of this year. We commenced the current lease with them on July 1st, 2015. They had actually been there for many years prior to that. That was an amended lease. So my recommendation is not to extend the lease term for another 5 years, but rather to allow them to stay out the time that they have on their current lease. And that is due to the fact that really considering the entire ARB portfolio, which is about $6.7 million worth of property, at this point in time. I think it would be wise to understand the building and capital needs across the entire system throughout our portfolio, and also given the fact that we're going to have some upcoming issues in terms of space and other needs with the town, I think it would be wise to not extend the lease at this time so that we have that capability. If we don't do that, we will not have any alternative space options moving forward, which I think would be a mistake, looking at the entire portfolio of options. So my recommendation to you tonight is not to extend the lease at this time and let them stay at the property, of course, through the end of their term, which would expire in 1 year. So, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to pause there?
See if there's any questions from I have an understanding of the situation. Would support not extending that lease based on the needs of the town and the use of the building.
I support that.
So, just to be clear, their lease, the lease ends this June.
No, we
No,
have
next
to
year.
let them know by June 30th of our intention to extend it for 5 years. It expires in 1 year from June 30th. It's not in the memo. The end of their term is June, it actually says, we'll terminate on June 30th, 2020.
Okay.
I just have to let them know.
Okay.
All of our lease agreements have an extension, either 5 years, some of them are 2 years, some of them are 1.
Okay.
This one was actually already extended as of July 1st of 2015. So some of you might recall that. Maybe.
All right. No, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So I think, Gene, unless you have any questions, I think I'd
So the memo talks about 23 Maple Street and step extension. Are those two separate?
They're two separate.
Yeah, that's what was
applications,
confusing
yes.
me.
So I'm
Yeah,
just
okay.
trying
No,
to
No, we're only
uh,
talking about
go
23
through
Maple.
23 Maple
Okay.
Street right now. One's an extension for one property. Step is a program that's located at the central school.
And tell me a little bit more about what the department and we would do if we did not extend the lease. But, when you talk about our portfolio, et cetera, what's the alternative for not extending the lease?
Either finding another tenant or enabling the town to have that space available for other space needs that the town might have in the future,
Mhm.
which is what we've done with other properties. And given the space constraints that we clearly have in town, I think it would be wise to keep that property open for those future potential obligations.
And how many square foot is that?
The total square footage of that property. It's about.
Usable square feet in the building?
Yeah, it's basically, the whole square footage is 18,000 square feet, actually.
That's
But the
gross.
property itself
Gross,
is
not usable.
gross, but the property itself has actually a large number of bedrooms. It's used as a residential facility
Yeah, but it
at
would
this
make more
current
sense
time,
to use
as
it
a
as a
single-family
town,
home.
as a town building at this point, given the space constraints, the future needs of the town. Having it open, being able to do that, and convert it would be a wiser move for the town to keep it in its current state. So I think with that, I would move not to renew the lease.
So motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next one is STEP, which is also known as Schools for Children. Some of you might be familiar with the program. It's been operating in the community for a fairly long time, actually, and in particular housed next door at Central School. They actually, their lease is technically up on June 30th, but we granted them in their most recent lease amendment an option to extend on a month-to-month basis for an additional 6 months after the lease expires. So that would mean that they technically can stay there through December 31st of 2019. They have decided to exercise that option. Though they may not actually need to stay through December 31st, we need to allow them to be able to stay for as long as they need to. That does, of course, have an impact on the central school renovation plan, which was that initially we gauged that they were going to be out of the space by the end of their lease term so that we could then proceed with the renovation project as planned. We are going to basically be off by about 2 months after they are likely to move out by the end of this summer. They're planning to move
How's
to
that?
another space.
How's that conflict with the renovation? I mean,
The renovation plan was that actually we were going to put it out to bid. We were hoping to award it, start the work on the second floor first, because we have to start there so that we can then move the Health and Human Services Department up to the second floor, move the retirement board up to the second floor, and then begin the ground and first floor renovations. So we can't start anything until the second floor tenant leaves, essentially. So the second floor tenant is going to stay on a month-to-month basis. It's likely that they will be vacating the space as of the end of August, so that they can move on to their next school year in a new location.
but there's a 2-month overlap, you're saying?
It's about, yeah, so we'll be about 2 months off. So I think that what will happen is we'll put it out to bid in the summer, award the contract for the fall, so that then the renovations on the second floor can begin as soon as they vacate the space. And they're supposed to continue for about 3 months is the projected timeline for the second floor renovations, so that then we can begin the ground and first floor renovations in January. So that's like a rough timeline. The point is just it's really just letting you know that they have exercised their option to stay. So there's not actually any action in particular that you need to take. This is just giving you that information. This is already in their lease, so they already have that option.
Okay.
Okay.
This is just an update.
This is just an update.
So there's nothing we can do.
No, there's
Okay.
Nothing
no,
we need
not
to
at this
do.
time, no.
Okay.
We did try to work with them on alternative options, but at this time they're going to stay. They're working on an alternative space to move to, but they're not going to be able to move there immediately. They'll likely move by the end of the summer, so as not to disrupt programming and staffing, et cetera.
Mhm.
And so that, I think now I've just given you the central school renovation update. That's basically the adjusted timeline that I just mentioned.
Okay.
All right?
And then the senior center proposed name change, which is
Well, maybe
requested by-
this is sort of separate. Maybe, I don't know if you've read the memo that Christine Bongiorno sent to me. Essentially, they're looking to move away from calling part of the space next door a senior center. It doesn't align with other movements across the country to get to more age-friendly terminology. And many former senior centers are now considered community life centers or community centers, just sort of generally speaking. It is actually called a multi-purpose center next door, but it does use the word senior. And so they would like to propose changing that name to a community center. They want the entire building to be called a community center. That's kind of the catch. My suggestion here is that, of course, they can rename the senior center to be the community center, but I really think the central school building should stay the central school building. It is historically known as the central school. It's written on the building. My preference would be, and my advice, my recommendation to you would be to keep it as such, but of course to allow them to change their name to a community center. And what's been happening is basically we have, Mystic River Watershed Association, we have the Arlington Center for the Arts, we have other tenants in the building who've basically been saying that they're located at the central school. I think it would be strange for the Arlington Center for the Arts to be at the community center. So it's like a lot of,
Yeah. No, I think that.
rebranding the entire building, I think, not the best.
Rebranding the senior center portion of that, I think I'd be fine with that.
So just in their newly designed space, it would be the Arlington Community Center.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So Christine's memo says this was brought to both the Council on Aging Board and the Arlington Senior Association. Do we know if they are comfortable with the name change?
Yes,
Because her
they're-
memo doesn't say.
They are, both of them.
Yeah.
They're both intent on that. Those organizations fall under Health and Human Services.
Right.
So she's.
But did the Council on Aging Board vote that it's okay to rename their part to Arlington Community Center? And did the Senior Association also vote that they were okay
That's
with
my
it.
understanding from Christine, is that they have discussed this and they've requested specifically to be able to rename that particular space. They're actually embarking on a capital campaign altogether, so they want to do that with the new name in mind. And the capital campaign would be to raise money for furniture and equipment in the space, not for the,
Not for the building.
not for the building renovations.
But you're not asking us to decide on anything with this, with the change of the senior center to community center. We're just asking about the school building itself, the actual physical building. Do we want to keep it as central school or change that? I'm not sure what the question is.
I think the question is, are we okay with the senior center renaming themselves the Arlington Community Center, but keeping the central school as it is still the central school building? There's sort of two questions there.
Well, I like the fact that the school is historic and we should keep it historic and call it Central School. As far as senior center or community center, I think it's up to them to decide, not us. It's their program, it's their,
Yeah. This board and the Department of Planning and Community Development had a very critical role when they first went to the central school building in helping them to get into that space. So I think that that's part of the link here, is coming back to us and saying, we're interested in making this change. Are you supportive?
I would be supportive, again, of keeping the name of the building as the central school, renaming the space being used as the senior center, the community center, the
Yeah.
Arlington Community Center. I think that's reasonable, more than reasonable.
Okay.
Do we need a vote?
I think that's fine.
I think it's fine too.
So,
If you want to vote, you can.
okay, so we would move to retain the name the central school, but authorize the Department of Health and Human Services to rename the portion of the building currently known as the Senior Center, the Arlington Community Center.
Yes.
I could second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Right?
Good. Moving on.
Okay.
Just a quick rundown of town meeting and next steps. I think for the most part, next steps and discussions of where to go are going to take place once a new member has been seated, which I'm told should be at our June 3rd meeting.
Yes.
But we can just sort of recap where
Yeah.
things stand as of last Wednesday night when town meeting was finally adjourned.
Yes.
That's a long
Town meeting
Yes.
adjourned after 8
Eight sessions.
sessions. I really just wanted to kind of run down, sort of just a summary of everything that was adopted, other bylaw amendments of interest potentially to this board, and then just funding that also relates to this board. So the first part is obviously the zoning that was adopted, Article 14, which was the parking reduction, Article 17 was the sign regulations, and then the accompanying bylaw, Article 26, which was removing the sign bylaw sections from the town bylaw. Articles 18 and 19, the amendments to the floodplain and inland wetland districts, the Dover Amendment in Article 20, 21, the bicycle parking, and 24, the half-story definition. Of course, Article 22 as well, making some corrections. The accessory dwelling unit 1 came within 9 votes of passage, but of course did not pass. And you obviously know what happened with Article 16 and all the related articles, which was that we took it off the table. So no action there. Other bylaw amendments of interest included Article 33, which you might recall was the adding the tree plan to the Good Neighbor Agreement. Article 35 was short-term rental regulations, which I helped work on with town council. And then the other thing that I wanted to note is a bunch of different funding appropriations for various projects, and then of course budgets. First one is the CDBG endorsement, which is Article 51. Article 53 was the Parking Benefit District operating and capital expenditures, which relates to work that we're doing in Arlington Center. Article 58, numerous capital items that relate to ARB properties were approved, including, of course, the $8+ million for the central school renovation, most significantly. Article 60 is funding that the town receives from basically transportation companies like Uber and Lyft, rideshare. We get an offset of funds actually annually. We requested that those funds get appropriated to the BRT permanent lane, which is going to be coming back in the next couple of months. So that was appropriated. Article 68 was CPA funding, which was for the Whittemore Park Phase 1 revitalization project. There will obviously be other phases to talk about, but I wanted to note that. And then special town meeting appropriated made two separate appropriations. The first one was Article 3, which was a designation for future zoning amendments, specifically to investigate industrial zoning in the community for a variety of reasons. Article 5 was to work on the development of residential design guidelines and also to determine an appropriate body that would help with design review processes moving forward. So, while we did have some, disappointment and challenges, we actually have a number of successes. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that from a positive point of view. There were many, many things going on at town meeting, and actually many of them netted positive results. And the ones that, many people are still interested in continuing to work on that directly relate to housing and mixed use. As Andrew noted, we really want to make sure that we have 5 people on the board. Rachel Zemsbury is the person who we've moved forward, who's at the select board meeting tonight. And hopefully will then begin her journey on the ARB on June 3rd. So there will be a forthcoming plan of action to continue the community dialogue and then revisit the mixed use and or multifamily uses in the future. So that is everything. Oh, and then actually there's one last teeny tiny thing, which is the bike parking. We've already started to, I think, initiate a discussion with my staff on a bike parking guide, which was something that we talked about doing. And then also next week, we're going to talk about the Dover review process and codifying that into our rules and regulations. So those are just 2 immediate follow-ups that I know that we want to get done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other comments from other members of the board?
I didn't notice, but for the beer garden bike parking, are they now using racks that are compliant with the new bylaw?
I think they have to change those racks. They're like the old school metal ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think that those will work.
I thought that was fencing.
Yeah, they're
No,
like
they
a-
actually had
no, they
bike
had, like, a
racks
separate-
last year. I didn't see
Oh, my
what they
God.
were using
Who
this
provided
time.
those?
They did.
They-
Yeah,
Darren did.
they purchased them,
Yeah.
brought them in. So,
Good. That's it for, unless anyone else has anything.
I think that was a nice wrap-up. I guess my only thought was during the course of our discussions, we discussed the potential of some other zoning changes, like workforce housing, for example, that we didn't get to for some reason. And I think, I guess I would at least find it helpful if at some meeting fairly soon, after the 5th person is here, we can go through and try to come up with at least our self-generated list of things. Like there are 3 sustainability, energy pieces that I'd like us to consider taking up, things like that, that we start having that discussion sooner rather than later.
After, either at the June 3rd meeting
Right.
or soon thereafter,
Yes,
we'll
yes.
have sort of a goal-setting agenda item where the 5 of us can discuss really about where things should head and how the division of labor should be made, and where the priorities should lie.
Yeah,
And
and I
just building off of that, it would relate to actually plans that we currently have in process through my department. So including the hazard mitigation plan, we're working on a net zero plan, we're doing a stormwater review process right now, which will then ultimately become hopefully a standalone stormwater review and bylaw process to comply with MS4. So we actually have a number of recommendations that are already emerging from those planning processes that will definitely relate to some of the sustainability components that we've talked about in the past. I'm sure you have other ideas in mind, but some
Yeah,
of them
maybe
relate to that.
maybe I'll email you some of the things that I had in mind so they don't
Absolutely.
get lost.
Yeah, I think if any of you wanted to email me any thoughts in advance of June 3rd, then maybe that'll help to make for a productive conversation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
If we wanted to do any kind of community process to form our goal setting,
Mhm.
is that something that we could talk about? And I don't have anything specific in mind,
Mhm.
but I know a lot of ideas were raised during the various hearings on the zoning articles and at town meeting and in all the comments that we received. And we should certainly take another look at those. But you know, I think it could be helpful to get input from the town, from the citizens of the town, of what's important to them at this point in time. And I'm not quite sure what an efficient way of doing that might be.
Mhm.
And I don't want to open a huge, lengthy process because we have to restart this process and be able to get some things done over the next year. But I do want to make sure that we take into account what the community's priorities are as we move forward.
I think that makes sense. Okay. All right. So, do we have any input from members of the public in the room this evening? All right. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Actually, before you do that, I'm sorry, can I just...
Take it back?
Would you take that back, please? The correspondence received, which was the license, the waterways license. I just wanted to confirm if you had any questions about that or the Spy Pond erosion control project in general,
No.
which is also being coordinated in my office.
Looked good to me.
Okay,
I like those little decks that stick out there, it's nice.
Yeah.
good.
All right.
All right.
You can remove.
We move, motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You
So efficient.